She was sitting at the bus stop with everything she owned in a garbage bag, and Elijah Banks knew the bag before he knew the girl. He knew it the way you know a sound from your own childhood, not by thinking, but by the way your body goes still before your mind catches up. Black plastic, stretched tight at the corners, knotted twice at the top, not a backpack, not a suitcase, a garbage bag. And a child sitting beside it on a metal bench, her hand resting on top of it the way you rest a hand on a dog you are not sure will stay. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked him. She had looked up first. She was small, 11, maybe 12, with her hair braided in neat rows and a jacket 2 sizes too big, the zipper pull replaced with a bent paper clip. Her legs did not reach the ground, so her feet hung above the concrete still. "I think my car is," Elijah said. It stopped a little ways back. "I'm always waiting for someone," she said. "That's what foster kids do." Elijah Banks was 52 years old, and he had spent 30 of those years making sure he never again stood on the side of a road not knowing what came next. He had a driver. He had an assistant. He had people whose whole job was to keep the world from touching him unless he decided it should. But his assistant was out that week, and he had driven himself back from a meeting 2 towns over, and his car, a black sedan that cost more than most of the houses on this road, had chosen a stretch of Route 9 he had never once noticed to quietly give up. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Elijah Banks was just a man standing on a sidewalk with a phone in his hand and 45 minutes to wait for a tow. So he had walked. And walking, he had found the bus stop that time forgot. A bench with peeling green paint, a shelter with one panel missing, a faded sign that promised the next bus would come when it came. And on the bench, a girl and a bag. "How many homes have you been in?" he asked. He did not plan the question. It came out of the part of him he kept locked. She did not look away. "7, she said. "But I stopped counting after 5. She paused, and then she gave him the thing she had clearly given herself a long time ago, plainly, like a fact about the weather. "After 5, you stop unpacking." Elijah did not finish dialing the tow truck. He put the phone in his pocket and sat down on the far end of the bench, close enough that she knew he was there, not so close that she had to move. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The late sun was dropping behind the pines, turning the whole road gold and long-shadowed, and the air smelled like warm asphalt and somebody's cut grass. "That's a big bag," he said. "It's everything I have," she said, in the voice of someone reporting a true thing that no longer surprised her. "Where are you headed?" "New house. New family. Number 8, I guess." She looked straight ahead when she said it, not at him and not at the road, but forward. The way a person looks when they have learned not to expect anything to arrive from any direction. Elijah Banks had built strip malls and apartment towers and office parks across 3 states. He had sat across from bankers and county commissioners without blinking. But sitting on a metal bench beside an 11-year-old girl with a garbage bag, he felt like he was 10 years old again, and the feeling was so complete that for a moment he could not have told you what year it was. "You're staring at my bag," she said. "I'm sorry, it's okay. Everybody stares." She pulled it an inch closer, and he watched her fingers close on the plastic. Not out of fear, out of habit, the grip of somebody who had learned that if you set a thing down, it might not be there when you turned back. They just don't sit down. "How fast do they make you pack?" he asked. 30 minutes, she said. "Sometimes less. The worker shows up and says, 'Pack your things,' and that's how you find out what actually matters. Toothbrush, socks, the book Miss Caro gave me in home number 3. She shrugged one shoulder. "Everything else you leave." He said nothing. He had learned, a long time ago, that listening was the rarest gift anyone had ever given him, and that most adults could not do it because the silence frightened them. "The first family was nice," she said, unprompted. "The way children sometimes hand you the whole thing once they decide you will not flinch. They just had their own baby and didn't need me. The second one moved out of state. Something about paperwork. The third said I was too quiet. The fourth said I was too much." She stopped. "The 5th was the longest. Almost a year. I thought maybe that one was real. What happened?" "The dad got a new job. They said they couldn't do a foster kid and a new schedule at the same time." A small shrug. "After that, I stopped unpacking." Did any of them say goodbye? She actually thought about it, the way a person flips through old photographs. Number 2 cried. Number 5 left a note on my pillow. Said she was sorry, said I deserved better. A pause. The rest just stopped being there. One day the house is home. The next day it isn't. Elijah looked at her, 11 years old, 7 houses, and heard her speak about it the way an old soldier talks about old battles. Without heat, without tears, with only the flatness of someone who had learned that feeling things slowed you down when you needed to move fast. My grandmother used to say something about that, the girl offered. What was her name? Mama Pearl. She raised me before the system. She passed when I was 6. The girl's eyes stayed level. She said if people leave, it doesn't mean you weren't worth staying for. It means they weren't strong enough to stay. Elijah was quiet for a long time. He was looking at the road, but he was not seeing the road. He was seeing a different bus stop, a different decade, on the east side of a different city, where a 10-year-old boy sat with a black garbage bag between his knees and watched the buses pull up and pull away, and did not get on any of them, because he had no ticket and no idea where to go. That boy's 4th family had called the agency that morning and said he was difficult. He had not been difficult. He had been afraid. But afraid and difficult looked the same to people who did not want to look closely. That afternoon, 30-some years ago, an older woman had sat down on the bench beside that boy. She wore a cotton dress and carried a brown paper sack, and she did not look at him right away. After a while, she took out half a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and set it on the bench between them. In case you're hungry, she said. She did not ask why he was there. She did not ask about the bag. She did not give him the face adults make when they see a lonely child and want to feel better for having noticed. She just opened a small worn Bible and read, quietly, as though sitting beside a boy with a garbage bag was the most ordinary thing in the world. He had eaten that sandwich slowly. Peanut butter on white bread. The first food he'd had in 14 hours, because the last family had told him to leave his water bottle since they'd paid for it. When the worker's car finally came, the woman looked up from her Bible and said one thing. Whatever they tell you about yourself, baby, don't believe all of it. Most of it is about them, not about you. He never saw her again. He never learned her full name, only heard the bus driver call her Miss Ruthie once as she climbed the steps. And for 30 years, that one sentence had been the quiet foundation under everything Elijah Banks had ever built. Can I ask you something? He said to the girl now. You said you stopped unpacking after home number 5. Why then? She was quiet a moment. Because unpacking means you think you're staying, she said. And thinking you're staying is the part that hurts the most. Elijah understood that sentence in a place words rarely reach. He had spent his whole adult life unpacking, building, buying, acquiring, filling rooms with furniture he never sat in, and calendars with meetings he could not remember. Buying a house with 7 bedrooms for a family that never came. And sitting on that bench he wondered, for the first time, if all of it had only ever been one long argument he was having with a garbage bag. An attempt to prove that nobody could ever again knock on his door and say, pack your things. A car slowed at the curb. An older gray sedan. A dent in the rear bumper. The kind of car that had carried too many people too many miles and never gotten fixed because there was never the time or the money. A woman got out, mid-40s, a folder under one arm, her hair coming loose the way it does on people who are already late for the next thing. Imani, she called, gentle but hurried. I'm sorry, honey, the bridge was backed up. So that was her name, Imani. The girl stood without a word, the way you stand when you have done a thing many times. The woman, Renata, her caseworker, glanced at Elijah, at the vest and the leather shoes and the expensive dead car down the road with its hazards blinking, and softened her voice into the polite, professional register of a person guarding a child. Thank you for keeping her company, sir. We'll take it from here. Where is she going? Elijah asked. I'm not able to share that. Is it a good home? Renata looked at him a long moment, the look of a person who wanted to answer honestly and knew honesty, and her job did not always fit in the same sentence. It's an available home, she said, and that word landed in Elijah's chest like a stone dropped into a well. Not good, not safe, not right, available, a house that had a bed nobody was in, a family that had said yes to one more because the system needed one more place to put a child. Imani lifted the garbage bag with both arms. The way you carry something heavy you have stopped complaining about. She started toward the car, and then she stopped and turned back to him. Thank you for sitting with me, she said. Most people don't. Most people don't know what that bag means, Elijah said. She studied his face. Not the way a child studies an adult, but the way one survivor reads another. You had one too, she said quietly. Didn't you? He did not answer. But something moved behind his eyes and she saw it and she nodded once slowly, as if it settled a question she had carried a long way. Then she climbed into the back seat, set the bag beside her like a second passenger, pulled the belt across her chest, and the door closed, and the gray car merged onto Route 9 and carried her toward a house she had never seen, to stay with people she had never met, in rooms she already knew she would not unpack in. Elijah watched until the car went around the bend. Then he stood at the empty bench a while longer, looking at the place where the bag had been. The tow truck came an hour later. He barely noticed. At home, 6,000 square feet of stone and glass set back behind a row of oaks, a front door so heavy it made a sound like sealing something shut. The house was quiet in the way a large space gets when too few people have lived in it for too many years. His wife, Camille, had passed 3 winters back. They had tried for children and could not, and when she raised adoption, he had told her the truest thing he could say out loud. I don't know how to be a father. Nobody taught me. She had looked at him a long time and never asked again, and he had told himself that was wisdom. Now there were 7 bedrooms and he slept in one. Miss Della had dinner ready. She had run his kitchen and his calendar, and quietly him, for 15 years. She set the plate at the long table where he always sat. At the end, the other 7 chairs empty, and she watched him not eat. You're quiet, she said, more than usual. I met a girl at a bus stop today, he said, and he told her, the bag, the 7 homes, the flat practical voice, the word available, the gray car pulling away while he stood there and did nothing. When he finished, Miss Della said, and you let her go. It was not a question and it was not an accusation. It was something in between, and it cut. I'm a stranger, Della. She looked at him the way she did when he said something true but not honest. You were also a child once, she said, waiting on a stranger to do something. She took his untouched plate, turned off the kitchen light, and said good night as though the world were still turning the way it should. Upstairs, Elijah lay in the largest of 7 bedrooms and could not sleep because all he could think of was a number. 7 bedrooms in this house, every one of them empty. 7 homes for that girl, every one of them temporary. The same number, the same emptiness, only dressed in different clothes. The next morning he made a phone call that had nothing to do with money. His attorney of 20 years, David Okonkwo, answered on the second ring. It's 7 a.m., Elijah. You're either buying something or you're in trouble. Neither, Elijah said. I need you to find a child. A silence, that's not simple. There are privacy laws, sealed records. That's why I'm calling a lawyer and not a search engine. Why do you want to find her? Elijah looked out at the oaks moving in the morning wind. In 20 years, David had never heard him speak of his childhood, not once. The man who came from nothing was part of the legend, but the specifics of that, nothing stayed behind a wall, Elijah never opened. Because I was that kid, he said, and nobody came looking for me. There was a long pause on the line. Then David said, give me a day. He called back that evening. Imani Cole, 11. Placed with a family called the Pruitts, about 40 minutes out. Licensed, clean record, no complaints. But Elijah, they've already got 4 other foster kids in the home. 2 bedrooms for the children. The wife is the caregiver, the husband works long hours. It isn't dangerous, it isn't abusive, it's stretched thin. Very thin. What do I need to do? If you're serious, apply through the county as a foster parent. Paperwork, training classes, a home study, a court hearing. 3 to 6 months. And Elijah, single men applying to foster get scrutinized harder, not softer. There's no guarantee at the end. Start it, Elijah said. He drove out to the Pruitt's street one afternoon and did not knock. He parked 2 houses down and watched through a chain-link fence. 2 boys chasing each other with sticks. A small girl in a plastic sandbox, and, Alone on the back step with a notebook on her knees, Imani, head down, hand moving slowly across the page, not calling to the others, not called to. When Mrs. Pruitt leaned out the door, 45, tired in the way of a person doing the work of two, and called them in for supper, Imani closed the notebook and went last through the door, and no one asked what she had been drawing. Elijah remembered a notebook of his own, his third foster home, a house on a street a lot like this one. He had found it in a dumpster behind a drugstore, the pages wrinkled and water-stained but blank, and he had drawn buildings in it, tall ones, wide doors, lobbies of marble, because drawing them was the closest he could come to living in them. Nobody ever asked what he was drawing. The notebook sat by his bed for 3 years until the day he moved again and left it behind, because there was no room in the garbage bag. 30 years later, those buildings existed in steel and stone, across 3 states. An entire life that began as pencil lines in a book nobody ever looked at. That girl is building something, he thought, watching Imani's door close. She just doesn't know it yet, and nobody around her can see it. He went to the county office in a plain sweater. He had thought carefully about what to wear, which he almost never did. In business, he wore what power looked like, and today he wanted to look like what steady looked like. The supervisor, Mrs. Ferris, folded her hands across a desk crowded with files and told him the truth people usually needed to hear. Most people who sit in that chair mean it, right up until they learn how much paperwork it is, how many classes, how many questions about their own childhood and their own reasons. Then they decide it's easier to write a check. I know how the system works, Elijah said. I was in it. 5 homes, returned 4 times before someone finally kept me. Mrs. Ferris's hands came apart. She sat back and looked at him differently, not like a name in the paper, like a person. Single men are rare in this, she said. You'll be asked things most people are never comfortable answering. I'm not asking to skip the line, Elijah said. I'm asking to stand in it. She opened a drawer and set a thick folder on the desk between them. It was heavier than any contract he had ever signed. He learned that Imani drew houses too. Her teacher wrote it in a report David pulled, cooperative but reserved, withdrawn, and then a line that stopped him. Imani draws houses during free time, not the house she lives in, houses she imagines. So he took a plain sheet of white paper, not letterhead, and a pen, not a keyboard, and he wrote to her. He told her he was the man with the broken-down car. He told her he used to carry a notebook when he was her age, and draw buildings, places he wanted to make, and that one day nobody asked him what he was drawing, and he never showed a soul. I don't know what you draw, he wrote, but I think it matters. Whatever is in that notebook, keep going. Sometimes the things we put on paper are the first drafts of the things we build for real. You don't know me, but I wanted you to know that someone noticed. He signed it only Elijah, drove to her school, and left it, sealed, with the office to pass through her teacher, and he told them he understood every precaution and would honor all of them. Imani had never gotten a letter before. Not a real one, not one with her name pressed into paper and ink. The last person to write her name on anything had been Mama Pearl, on a birthday card with a hand-drawn cake, when Imani was 5. She still had it, folded so many times the creases had gone white, in the inside pocket of her jacket. The pocket where she kept the things she would grab first if someone said, "Pack your things." She read the letter twice in the corner of the schoolyard, then folded it along its lines and slid it into that same pocket, next to the card. That night, in the room she shared at the Pruitts, she opened her notebook. But she did not draw a house. She drew a bus stop, a metal bench with peeling paint, a shelter with a missing panel, 2 people on the bench, one tall and one small, and a bag between them. At the bottom she wrote one word, stayed, because that was what the man had done. He had not fixed anything, or promised anything, or told her everything would be all right. He had only stayed. And for a girl who had watched people leave 7 times, that one word meant more than any promise. The home study came to Elijah's living room in the person of Mrs. Torres, who had a clipboard and a face that said she had done this many times and was not easily moved. She noted the size of the house without admiring it. Then she sat and asked, "Why do you want to foster a child?" He told her about the bench, the bag, The way Imani carried everything she owned in something built to be thrown away. That's a nice story, Mrs. Torres said. But fostering isn't a story. It's 3 a.m., wake-ups from a child who doesn't trust you enough to say why she's crying. It's a kid looking you dead in the eye and saying, "I hate you," and you staying anyway. Are you ready for that? I think so. Most people in that chair say they know so. You're the first today who said think. She wrote something. Tell me about your own time in the system, he told her. 5 homes. Placed at 6 after his mother passed. No father on record. Returned 4 times. Too much work. A move out of state. A family's own baby. Behavioral problems. Did you have them? She asked. I was angry, he said. I didn't know how to say I'm scared, so I said it with my fists. Broke a window once. But I never hurt a soul. I just didn't know how to be in a place that might disappear. And the 5th home. His voice changed, not louder, just different, like a door opening into a room he rarely entered. A history teacher, Mr. Abernathy, who saw him drawing buildings in the margins and, instead of taking the notebook, asked what he was building. As if what a boy did on paper were real. Mr. Abernathy adopted him at 14, single, and it took forever because the system made it hard, but he stayed. He died when Elijah was 23 and never saw a single one of the towers, but they exist because of him, Elijah said. Every building I ever put up started in a notebook he didn't take away. Mrs. Torres was quiet. Then she asked the hardest one. Do you want to save this girl, Mr. Banks? Or do you want to save yourself at age 10? He let the question sit in the room like something heavy that had to be looked at from every side. Maybe both, he said finally. That, she said, closing her notebook, is the most honest answer I've heard in 15 years of this work. The process moved, but it did not move fast. Background check, 8 training sessions, a hearing that could not even be scheduled until the classes were done. And then David called with a different voice. The Pruitts are in trouble. He lost his job 3 weeks ago. The agency is reviewing whether they can keep fostering. And Elijah, last child placed, is usually first one moved. That's Imani. Can I pay their bills? Can I help them? No, David said firm. Money will backfire. Judges are suspicious of rich people who suddenly want a child they've never met. They've seen it. People who treat fostering like a charity project and hand the kid back when it gets hard. That night Miss Della found him not eating again. That little girl scares you, she said, because she's the part of you that you tried to bury. You built all this so you'd never have to think about that boy again. And here he is, sitting at a bus stop, looking right at you. It happened on a Tuesday. The Pruitts could not continue. All 4 children were going back. Imani did not have to be told. She had heard the phone call the night before, the can't anymore, and the I'm so sorry, and she knew what those words meant. She packed in the order she always packed. Toothbrush, socks, the book from Miss Caro. But first she took the birthday card and the letter out of her jacket pocket, held them a moment, and put them back and zipped the pocket shut. Those 2 things stayed on her body, not in the bag. The notebook went in last, wrapped in an old shirt so the pages wouldn't bend. 30 minutes, start to finish. She was getting faster. In the car she said, "It's not your fault," before Renata could apologize, and Renata said, "I know. But I'm sorry anyway. They passed the school. They passed the bus stop." Imani turned her head and looked at the empty bench until the car went around the corner, and she couldn't see it anymore. They placed her that evening in a group home called Beacon House, a low brick building, a long hall, 2 beds to a room, a schedule taped by the door. Bed number 9. She put the garbage bag under it and did not unpack. She lay looking at a hairline crack that ran from the light to the corner of the ceiling and traced it with her eyes the way she used to trace roads on maps, imagining where they might go. Then she pulled out the notebook and drew the bus stop again. The bench empty this time, no people, and underneath she wrote 5 words. He said, "Don't stop drawing." She slid it under her pillow and did not sleep for a long time. But she did not cry either. She had stopped crying after home number 4. Crying changed nothing. It only made the pillow wet. Elijah heard the next morning. "Everything in her life is temporary," he said into the phone, setting his coffee down very carefully, like a man trying hard not to break something. He wanted to drive to Beacon House that hour. David told him he couldn't. that showing up unannounced about a specific child looked wrong, raised flags. The best thing you can do is finish the training and wait for the hearing. Wait. The word felt like holding his breath underwater. So he did the only thing he was allowed to do. He took out the plain white paper again. "I heard you moved," he wrote. "I know how that feels. I moved 5 times. I thought I'd never stop. I thought moving was just what people like me did, like it was who I was. But I did stop. One day, someone decided I was worth staying for. It took longer than it should have. But it happened. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready, however long that takes. Don't stop drawing." He wrote her name on the front the way he usually reserved for contracts worth millions. Except this was not a contract. This was a man writing a name on an envelope, like it was the most important word he had ever written. Because it was. The courtroom was small. No jury box, no gallery, just wood paneling and fluorescent light, a raised bench, 2 tables, a few rows of chairs. Family court, where the decisions weigh more than anything settled in a boardroom, and the furniture costs less than a single chair in Elijah's office. He wore a dark vest, no tie. Mrs. Ferris and Mrs. Torres sat behind him. Renata had come on her day off. In the back, beside a court counselor she had met twice, sat Imani, very still, hands in her lap, the paperclip zipper pulled shut over the pocket where the letters were. The judge entered. Her nameplate read Judge Naomi Ellison, and Elijah felt something move through him. Ellison, so close to the name of the teacher who had kept him. And he knew it was coincidence, and some coincidences still feel like they are trying to tell you something. She read the file, then looked up. "Mr. Banks, you're petitioning to foster Imani Cole with intent to adopt. Everything appears to be in order. But I have questions. Why do you want to foster this child?" Elijah looked directly at her, not at his hands. "Because I met her at a bus stop," he said. "She had everything she owned in a garbage bag. And I knew that bag because I carried one just like it at her age. I was in the system 8 years, 5 homes, returned 4 times. Nobody ever asked me if I was okay, or what I was drawing in my notebook, or came looking for me. I built a company. I built a life that looks, from the outside, like everything worked out, and I spent 30 years running from the boy on that bench. Then I sat down next to a girl, sitting in the exact place I used to sit. And I understood that running from the bench never made it empty. It just meant nobody was on it when the next child showed up." "Mr. Banks," the judge said, "this child has been rejected 8 times. Do you understand what that does to a person?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said, "because I was room number 9 once." He did not know that Imani's bed at Beacon House was numbered 9. He could not have known. But the words dropped into the room like a stone into still water, and in the quiet after them, people stopped breathing for a second, the way they do when something true has been said. Mrs. Ferris rose and confirmed the department supported the placement. His history, she said, gave him an understanding most applicants simply did not have. Mrs. Torres rose and said the thing that stayed with the room. When I asked whether he wanted to save the girl or save himself, he said maybe both. In 15 years, that's the most real answer I have gotten. And Renata stood, smoothed her blazer, tired the way she was always tired, and said, "Your Honor, in 12 years I have never seen an applicant write 2 handwritten letters to a child he met once at a bus stop. Not emails. Letters, on paper. Both of them are in that little girl's jacket pocket right now, because she carries them everywhere she goes." Judge Ellison looked to the back of the room. Elijah turned in his chair and found Imani's eyes and held them. He did not smile or wave or perform anything. He just looked at her the way one person looks at another when words are not enough and both of them know it. And Imani, slowly, almost invisibly, nodded. One small movement of her head that you would have missed if you blinked. Elijah did not blink. Neither did the judge. "I have seen a great many good intentions in this room," Judge Ellison said. "A great many people who wanted to help until helping became inconvenient. I have rarely seen someone who understands what a child needs because they once needed the same thing." She picked up her pen. "I am approving the foster-to-adopt placement of Imani Cole with Elijah Banks, effective immediately, subject to the standard reviews. Mr. Banks, this child has waited a long time. Do not make her wait any longer." "I won't, Your Honor," he said. The gavel came down once, a small sound that somehow echoed. 3 days later, he pulled up to the county office and found her in the plastic waiting room chairs. The garbage bag on the floor beside her, the same black plastic, the same careful knot. "She's all yours, Mr. Banks," the staffer said kindly, though the words landed like a package being handed across a counter. Elijah looked at the bag. "After today," he said, "you won't need that anymore." Imani picked it up and held it to her chest with both arms. "I'll keep it," she said. "Just in case." He nodded. He did not push or try to take it or tell her she was safe now. None of the things people say when they want to believe a thing is fixed before it is. He just said, "Okay." When the car turned up the long drive and the house came through the oaks, she leaned forward. "This is where you live?" "This is where we live," he said. Miss Della was in the doorway in her apron. "So you're Imani. I've heard a lot about you." "From who?" the girl asked. "From a man who hasn't talked about anything else for 2 months." Imani walked slowly through the house the way a person walks through a museum, looking, not belonging, not yet. Upstairs, Elijah opened a door. The room was not the largest, but it was ready. White sheets and a soft blue blanket. A shelf half filled with books for her age, a desk at the window looking over the oaks, and on the desk a wooden box open. Colored pencils, drawing pens, brushes, and a new sketchbook bound in leather. She touched the pencils lightly. The way you touch a thing you are afraid might vanish. "You remembered," she said. "I remembered," he said, and she set the garbage bag down on the floor near the closet, not under the bed, not hidden, just down. Something she was not ready to give away but no longer needed to hold. That night, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Imani did not sleep in her shoes. In every home before, she had slept with her laces double knotted, because you never knew when 30 minutes would begin. But tonight she untied them, one and then the other, and set them side by side beside the bed, toes forward, and she pulled the blanket to her chin, and looked up at a smooth white ceiling with no crack in it, and she slept. 6 months changed the house, not the walls, but the sound of it. There were quick, light steps on the stairs now, and the scratch of a pencil in the evenings, and a cabinet that sometimes opened at odd hours because Imani still got up at night to make sure the food was still there. She called him Mr. Elijah, not Dad, and he never corrected her, because he understood that names are earned, not assigned, and some take longer than others. Her grades rose. Her teacher wrote home that she had raised her hand twice in 1 week, for a girl called Withdrawn for years, a revolution. She made a friend, a girl named Lena, who drew animals while Imani drew buildings. The two of them holding up their notebooks to show each other, the quietest and first real friendship she had ever had. And Elijah changed too. Leaving the office before dark, moving meetings out of the dinner hour, standing at the back of a school gym under paper streamers to watch Imani explain the shadows in her drawing to her teacher, and understanding that it was the most important meeting he had attended all year. One evening she came to his office holding the old notebook, fuller now. "I drew something for you." She opened to the last page. It was a house, not an imagined one, but this one, the stone, the oaks, the heavy door, the drive curving toward the road, and in front of it, 2 figures, one tall and one small, standing side by side. Underneath, in her careful hand, "This is the first house I didn't have to imagine." Elijah looked at it a long time and did not speak, because some moments are too full for words. Then he said quietly, "Thank you for drawing us a home." He had built hundreds of buildings and seen his name on plaques and in newspapers, and not one of them had ever been called a home until a girl with a notebook drew one for him. A week later he drove back out to Route 9 and sat down on the bench with the peeling green paint, warm from the afternoon sun, and watched a bus pass, then another, the way he had watched them as a boy. Then he called Mrs. Ferris. "I want to do something," he said, "and I want your help, not a check. I want every child who enters the system in this state to be handed real luggage, a suitcase with their own name on it, because no child should carry their whole life in something built to be thrown away." A long pause on the line. "Do you know how many children enter the system here every year?" she asked. "I do," he said. "I already ran the numbers." "Of course you did," she said, and for the first time, he heard her smile through the phone. He named the program after a woman he had never properly met, whose full name he had never learned. He called it Ruthie's Bags, after a woman in a cotton dress, who once set half a sandwich on a bench beside a frightened boy, and told him not to believe everything people said about him. Here is the part most versions of this story never reach. Being moved by a child on a bench costs you nothing, and it is not the same as staying. Pity ends the moment you look away. Repair begins the moment you change what you are willing to lose: your evenings, your certainty, your careful, guarded life. A man can feel his heart crack open at a bus stop and still drive home and do nothing, and most of us do exactly that, not because we are cruel, but because we have been taught to look past certain kinds of struggle, the way we are taught to look past certain kinds of buildings on certain kinds of streets. Somewhere near you right now, a child is carrying everything they own in a plastic bag. And the question inside that bag is always the same, and it is very simple. Is anyone going to stay? The answer changes everything. Mama Pearl told Imani that the people you need are not sent to churches or fancy places. They are sent to bus stops and grocery lines and waiting rooms, sent to wherever you are already standing. She was right. What she did not add is that sometimes the person you were sent to save is also the one who needed saving. If this story reached you, sit with it a moment before you scroll on. Think of the person in your own life who is carrying something heavy and quiet and has stopped asking for help, not because they don't need it, but because they stopped expecting it. Then do the small, unglamorous thing. Sit down on the bench. Stay. And if you'd like more stories like this one, subscribe and tell me in the comments about someone who taught you what it means to stay. This story is a work of fiction. Every event, character, conversation, company, institution, and situation in this narrative is entirely imaginary, created for storytelling and to explore dignity, fairness, courage, and the human cost of prejudice. Nothing here represents actual events or should be read as fact. But the foster care crisis is real. Hundreds of thousands of children are in the system right now, and far too many of them still move from home to home, carrying their belongings in garbage bags. Fiction cannot fix that. It cannot fund a placement, or shorten a wait, or hand a child a suitcase. But it can make you see the bag on the bench and wonder who is carrying it, and where they are going, and what it costs them to keep waiting. If you want to do more than wonder, organizations working to bring dignity to children in foster care, providing real luggage, comfort items, mentorship, and support to families, are doing the work stories can only point toward. Look them up, show up, stay. Stories don't change policy, but they change how we see the people policy is meant to protect, and that is where every change begins.